The old man's hand shook as he pressed his thumb toward the ink. 2 riders held him by the shoulders against the wooden rail of a corral that was not his own, and a third slid the paper flat beneath his hand, patient, like a plate set in front of someone you mean to poison. "Sign it," the tall one said. "Put your mark on it and she rides home." Behind them the sun hung low and red over the canyon rim, and dust moved in slow ropes across the ground. The old man looked at the paper. He looked at his daughter in the doorway of the way station, held there by a man with a rifle. And then, in a voice worn down to gravel, he said the only thing left to say. "You can take the land, but you will never own what she carries out of here. If someone put a paper in front of you, and your child on the other side of it, what would you sign? Tell me down in the comments. And stay with me, because that thumbprint was not the first lie on that deed, and the old man in the canyon did not know yet that the dark rider waiting beyond the corral had already decided how the evening would end. Come back with me to a fence at first light, and I'll show you how they brought him to that corral." The morning had started clean. Don Aurelio Sendez was 70 years old and he still walked his fence line at first light, the way he had for 40 years, running his palm along the top rail to feel for the cracks the winter left. His ranch sat where the red earth met the low canyons of the New Mexico territory, a half-day's ride from the border, in the year 1884. It was not much to look at. A stone well, a corral, a stable with a leaning roof. 200 acres of hard ground that had killed better men than the ones who wanted it now. But 200 acres meant little in that country, and Don Aurelio knew it, and so did the man who wanted them. What meant everything was the well. It was the last permanent water between the north pastures and the pass that led down toward the railhead. The one deep stone throat that did not go dry in August, when everything else in the valley turned to dust and cracked mud. A man who owned that water did not own 200 acres. He owned every acre a thirsty cow had to cross to reach the cattle cars. Don Aurelio's grandfather had lined the well with stone beside the old acequia, on land whose water rights reached back to a Mexican grant, and the paper for that water was older than the territory itself. His daughter, Isadora, was 24 and had her mother's steadiness in the hands and her father's refusal in the jaw. That morning she had ridden out toward the North Wash on her gray mare to bring back a stray, and she had not come back. What came back instead, near noon, was a boy on a mule with a folded note pinned to his shirt, too frightened to speak. The note was written in a clean American hand, and it did not waste words. It said the land now belonged to the Halloran Land and Cattle Company. It said Don Aurelio would come to put his mark on a deed of ratification by sundown, before witnesses, acknowledging the sale as his own free act. It said the girl was well, and would stay well as long as the old man was reasonable. The note was polite. That was the part that should have frightened him most. The men who do the worst things rarely shout. They write neatly, and they smile, and they call it business. Polite men with clean handwriting had already emptied half that valley, and Don Aurelio was about to learn how. Cole Halloran was not from the border. He had come out of the East 3 years earlier with a leather case full of surveys and a voice like warm oil, and he had spent those 3 years buying up the valley, one frightened family at a time. In that country, in those years, a clever man could steal a whole watershed without ever firing a shot. All it took was paper. The territory was thick with old Spanish and Mexican land grants, their boundaries vague, their records scattered between the Surveyor General's office in Santa Fe and archives down in Mexico. And a man with a forger's hand and a friend in the right office could bury a false deed in a chain of title and let it surface years later, looking older than the truth. It had been done to grants 10 times the size of Don Aurelio's, by men in good suits, and the courts had been slow, and the families had been poor. Halloran had learned the trick on a smaller scale than the men who taught it to him, and improved on it. He never raised a hand himself. He did not have to. He had men for that, 6 of them, riding for wages, led by a lean Texan named Deacon Frame, who wore his pistol high and his conscience nowhere. By early afternoon, Don Aurelio had saddled his old gelding and ridden into the settlement of Tierra Parda to beg for help. He found less than he hoped and more than he expected. When he said Halloran's name aloud in the plaza, a shopkeeper he had known 20 years stepped back inside and closed his shutters. But an old woman caught his sleeve in the shade of the church wall and told him, low and fast, that her son-in-law had signed a paper just like the one coming for Aurelio 2 winters back, and had walked off his land with a wagon and a mule and nothing else, and that the paper had borne his own signature in a hand he could not write, for the man had never learned his letters. She was not the only one. By the time Aurelio reached the cantina, 3 families in that town could tell the same story, and none of them would say it above a whisper. And this is where the story turns, because the man in the black cape was already there. He had come in the night before on a black horse, a stranger passing through, and taken a room over the cantina for no reason other than that his horse was tired, and so was he. He was not looking for Don Aurelio. He was not looking for anyone. He was sitting in the shade of the cantina's front porch, with his boots on the rail and his hat down over his eyes, when the old man rode in calling for a marshal that Tierra Parda did not have. He might have let it pass. Understand that. A man who rides alone from pueblo to pueblo learns to let a great many things pass, because a man who stops for every wrong on the road never gets old. He watched Don Aurelio dismount badly, watched the townsfolk find things to look at on the ground, watched the shape of a town that already knew who Halloran was and had already decided not to cross him. And he might have pulled his hat back down. But then 3 riders came into the plaza, and the led horse carried a gray saddle blanket across its withers that did not belong to it, a woman's blanket, woven in a pattern from Don Aurelio's own house. The old man saw it and made a sound like something tearing, and the stranger, watching from the porch, understood that the girl those riders had taken was not somewhere far off and abstract. She was close, and these were the men who had her. Deacon Frame swung down easy, in no hurry, the ease of a man who owns the fear in a place. He crossed to Don Aurelio and told him, loud enough for the porch to hear, that he had wasted a good horse's legs, because there was nobody in Tierra Parda dumb enough to stand between Halloran and a signature. Then he leaned close and said the girl had a pretty way of holding her chin up, and that it would be a shame to watch her learn some humility before the night was through. The man on the porch took his boots off the rail. It was not a large movement. Frame did not even see it. But the 2 townsmen nearest the cantina saw it, and they stepped back, because they had lived long enough to know what it means when a quiet man decides to stop being quiet. He walked out into the sun. He did not hurry. He stopped a few feet from Frame and looked at the Texan, and for a long moment he said nothing at all, and the nothing was worse than anything he could have said. Then he said, "The old man asked for help in front of the whole town. I heard it. So now it's mine." Frame laughed and asked if he had any idea whose land this was going to be by sundown. The stranger said he did not care whose land it was going to be. He cared that a girl was somewhere she did not choose to be, and that the man responsible was standing in front of him talking about humility. Frame's hand drifted toward his high pistol. And here is the thing the tall Texan did not understand. The thing none of Halloran's paid men understood until it was too late to matter. The stranger was not afraid of the gun. Frame searched his face for anger or fear, and found neither. The man simply waited, as if Frame had already made a mistake and had not noticed it yet. "Not here," the stranger said. "Not in front of these people. You want the land, you take me to the girl, and to the man who thinks he's buying her father, and we settle it where nobody bleeds who didn't ask to." It was not a plea. It was an instruction. And Frame, who was a killer but not a fool, understood that he had ridden into something he had not planned for. He wheeled his horse and said the stranger could follow him north, and say all that to a man who could actually sell him the land. And, he added with a thin smile, the old man was coming too, because Mr. Halloran wanted the deed settled with the whole family present. 2 of his men closed in on either side of Don Aurelio's gelding. The trap was plain, and the stranger saw it, and mounted his black horse and followed anyway, unhurried, a dark shape against the red ground. Because the girl was where they were going, and so now was he. Don Aurelio rode between two of Halloran's men with his back very straight. Once, on the trail, he pulled his old silver ring from his finger and tried to press it into the stranger's hand, the one thing of value he still owned, offered as payment. The stranger looked at the ring and did not take it. "Keep it for her," he said. Taking it would have made this a job. And whatever this was, it was not a job. The canyons north of Tierra Parda are bad country, all narrow dry washes and high broken walls, and Halloran had made his camp deep in one of them, and a place a man could hold against 50 with only 6 if the 6 knew their work. There was a low adobe way station the color of old blood, and behind it a rope corral and a scatter of tents, and above it, on the rocks, men with rifles. They had been holding Isadora there since morning. She was not tied. She did not need to be one door, open ground for a mile in every direction, and guns on the high rock. But she was not weeping and she was not begging. She sat with her back straight against the adobe wall, and every time Deacon Frame passed the doorway she watched him with a flat, measuring calm that unsettled him more than screaming would have. She had already worked out something the men had not. When they had grabbed her at the North Wash, one of them had swung down a leather satchel and set it on a barrel by the door, and it had fallen open, and she had seen inside it before anyone thought to close it. What she saw was not one paper, it was many. She saw her father's name written 3 separate times on 3 separate sheets, in 3 slightly different versions of the same hand, the way a man practices a signature that is not his own until he gets it right. She saw 2 survey maps of the same ground, with 2 different boundaries inked on them. She saw a page of names, other families, a column of figures beside each, and a smaller paper made out to men she did not know, sums paid to them as witnesses to sales they could not have witnessed. And she saw a little brass stamp and a bottle of pale tea, the tools a man uses to make new paper look old. She understood, sitting there against the wall, what all of it meant together. Halloran had not come to buy the ranch. He had forged the sale already. The deed in that satchel carried her father's name signed days ago, in ink her father had never touched. But a forged deed alone was a thing a good lawyer could still fight, and Halloran knew it. What he needed by sundown was the old man's true thumbprint, pressed before witnesses onto a second paper. A deed of ratification swearing the sale had been his own free and willing act. The forgery was the theft. The thumbprint was the lock on the door. With both filed together in Santa Fe, no court in the territory would ever pry the land back out of his hands, and her father, to save her, would press his thumb to anything. She understood one more thing. If she could keep that satchel from reaching Santa Fe, if the forgery and the practice sheets and the bought witnesses ever landed together on the right desk, then every stroke of Halloran's cleverness became the rope that hanged him. So she watched the barrel by the door, and she waited, and she did not let her face show that she was waiting. Cole Halloran arrived an hour ahead of the others, and went in to see the girl himself. This was his mistake, though he would not know it for a while. He was a handsome man gone slightly soft, well dressed for a canyon, and he crouched in front of her with his elbows on his knees, and explained, kindly, patiently, that none of this was personal. The valley was going to be cattle country whether the old families liked it or not. Progress did not ask permission. A man who could put water and rail together in that country was not a thief. He was the future, and the future did not wait on sentiment. He told her she seemed a practical young woman, and that he hoped she would help her father see reason. Isadora let him finish. Then she told him she had seen the satchel. She told him she had counted 3 of her father's signatures in a hand that was not his, and she watched the kindness go out of his face like a lamp turned down. And she knew, in that instant, that she had made herself dangerous, and that dangerous was better than useful, because useful people get discarded, and dangerous people get remembered. It was into this Halloran's face, still hard from what the girl had said, Don Aurelio riding in between 2 guns, the light already going red, that the man in the black cape came down the wash. He came slowly, in full view, his hands where they could be seen, one dark rider against the canyon walls, and he stopped 30 yards from the way station and did not dismount. Riflemen shifted on the rocks. Frame came out with his hand near his pistol, and Halloran walked into the light, dusting his knees, and looked up at the stranger with the curiosity of a man who has never been truly afraid of anything he could pay to remove. He asked the stranger's name. The stranger did not give one. He asked what the stranger wanted, and in the same breath offered to pay him twice whatever Don Aurelio had. Because to Halloran every man was a price with legs, and the only question was the number. The stranger looked at him a while. Then he said he wanted the girl on her own mare and riding home before the sun touched the canyon rim, and the old man riding beside her and the leather satchel left behind. Halloran could keep his money and his neat papers and whatever story he told himself at night, but the girl and her father rode home. Halloran smiled and said the stranger did not seem to understand the arithmetic. 6 guns. 1 man. He said it almost gently, and the man in the black cape said the arithmetic was why he had come down slow and in the open, where every man on those rocks could see him and could see Halloran, because he wanted them to look at their employer and understand something. They were paid for cattle work and for frightening farmers. Not one of them had signed on to die in a dry canyon over a rich man's forged paper. He raised his voice just enough to carry to the high rock. "The man who fires first," he said, "is the man I answer first. The rest of you can go home to wages that spend just as well whether this old man keeps his water or not." For a moment nothing moved but the dust. A revolver could stop 1 man. Doubt could stop all 6. The stranger had brought both, and he had brought the doubt on purpose. But Halloran had a clock, and he meant to use it. "Enough of this," he said. He nodded to Frame, and 2 men pulled Don Aurelio down off his horse and walked him to the corral rail, and a third laid the ratification deed flat against the wood and opened the ink. "Sign it," Frame told the old man. "Put your mark on it and she rides home." And the stranger, still mounted, still 30 yards off with every rifle in the canyon turned toward him, understood that the whole thing had just become a race between a thumbprint and a bullet, and that if he moved for his gun now, the old man would be dead before the girl cleared the door. So he did not move for his gun. He spoke to the rocks instead. "That paper," he called out, "is a lie the old man is signing to keep his daughter alive. Every one of you knows it. That deed goes to the Surveyor General's office in Santa Fe, but the kidnapping goes before a territorial judge, and a deputy marshal will ride back up this canyon looking for every armed man who stood on these rocks and watched. A copied signature might fool a county recorder. It has a harder time surviving Santa Fe. Ask your boss how many of you he can afford to have remembered. That was when Don Aurelio said his piece, 'You can take the land, but you will never own what she carries out of here,' and pressed his thumb toward the ink slow, buying seconds. Because he had heard the stranger and understood that seconds were all he had to give. And Deacon Frame, feeling the men behind him go uncertain, feeling 3 years of built fear leak out of the rocks like water from a cracked olla, understood that if he did not end this now, there would be nothing left to lead. So he drew. He was fast. He had always been fast, and it had always been enough. His pistol cleared leather clean and came up level. The stranger had come off the horse before Frame's barrel found him, not backward into cover, but sideways and low. Moving the whole time he fell, and the revolver was in his hand as though it had grown there. Frame's shot went through the air where a mounted man had been. The stranger's answer took Frame through the thick of the upper arm and knocked the pistol from his hand. And the Texan sat down hard against the adobe wall, staring at an arm that would not obey him. For half a breath the stranger's aim did not leave him. Frame was down, disarmed, done, and the stranger's thumb sat on the hammer, the way a question sits on a tongue. And for that half breath he was somewhere else, another stretch of dust, years earlier. Another man already beaten and still alive when he pulled the trigger. He had carried that shot farther than any wound. He held a moment longer than a merciful man should have. Then he let the hammer down slow and turned the barrel toward Halloran, and the old thing in his chest that had wanted the easy way went quiet again. Frame's shot and the stranger's answer had come so close together that the canyon gave back only one broken echo. And then, it was very quiet, and the man in the black cape was on one knee in the open with his revolver level, and it was not pointed at the rocks. It was pointed at Cole Halloran. Almost nobody on the rocks fired. That was nearly the whole of it. The men who had come for wages looked down at a rich man standing alone in the dirt, and decided, one by one, that his paper was not worth their blood. Rifles began to lower, but one did not. A younger man on the high rock, too new to be afraid, too proud to walk, swung his rifle down toward the kneeling stranger, and the stranger's revolver was on Halloran. And there was no time in the world to move it from the man to the rock. It was Isadora who moved. In the confusion of the draw, when every eye in the canyon had gone to the two men and the gun, she had hooked the satchel off the barrel with her foot and dragged it behind her into the doorway's shadow, and then she had crossed to where Frame's pistol lay in the dust and taken it up. Now she stepped into the light with it. She did not point it up at the boy on the rock. She leveled it flat at Cole Halloran, close, where she could not miss, and she said, loud enough for the whole canyon to hear it climb the walls, "He fires, and the first hole goes in the man who's paying you. Ask yourself if he's worth dying rich for." The boy on the rock froze with the rifle half down, and into that frozen half-second the stranger spoke. Quiet, not to the boy and not to the girl but to Halloran, his revolver never wavering. "Tell him to put it up," he said. "You're the only one here I'm sure I can hit before I fall." That was the arithmetic Halloran had never run, that all his guns could not save the one life he cared about, his own. He looked at the girl's steady hand, and at the quiet man who had already promised to take him first, and his voice came out of him thin and fast. "Put it up. Put it down, for God's sake." And the boy on the rock lowered the rifle, and looked at his wages, and walked back down the far side, and was gone. Halloran's oil had left his voice. He said the stranger would hang for this. He had friends, courts, a name. The deed was filed, the land was his, and shooting his men changed nothing on paper. And here the man in the black cape did the thing that finished it, and he did it without raising his voice. Isadora set Frame's pistol down in the dirt, now that no one needed it, and took up the satchel instead. She carried it into the light, and held it against her chest, and she did not wait for the stranger to speak for her. "3 versions of my father's name," she said, loud and level, in a hand that is not his. 2 surveys of the same water, drawn 2 different ways. Receipts made out to men who never met us, paid to witness a sale that never happened. A list of every house you emptied the same way, and the little stamp you used to make new lies look like old truth. I read all of it while your men thought I was a frightened girl against a wall. Then the stranger spoke, and he spoke only the consequence. A forged deed is worth something only as long as the man whose name is on it stays quiet and gone. This one is neither. He is standing right there, alive, with a whole town that watched him beg for his daughter. The day that satchel reaches a territorial judge in his living hand, it stops being your deed. It becomes the trail that leads a marshal straight back to your neat little office. Then he said the only part that was a threat, and he said it quietly. You built your valley on frightened people who signed because they had no other door. That door is open now. Ride out tonight, and keep riding, and maybe the families you cheated never find the paper that leads to you. Stay and fight it, and every one of them will line up in Santa Fe to watch you swing. Choose fast. The sun's almost down. Cole Halloran looked at the satchel in the girl's hands. He looked at the empty rocks where his men had been. He looked, last, at the quiet man on one knee in the dirt who had not once, in all of it, raised his voice. And he understood that he had lost not to a gun, but to the one thing his money had never been able to buy, which was a person who could not be made afraid. He got on his horse. There was no speech left in him. He rode up the wash and out of the canyon, and did not look back. By morning his office in Tierra Parda stood empty, the ledger gone from the desk, but he had left in too much haste to take everything, and what he left in that leather satchel would follow him a long way. The stranger bound Frame's arm tightly enough to give him a chance, if fever did not take it, and left him his water and nothing else, and told him that if he lived, he would answer to a court for the families in that ledger. Then Isadora saddled her own gray mare in the last red light, and helped her father onto his gelding, and stood a moment in front of the man in the black cape, holding the satchel against her chest. She did not offer him money. She had understood him better than her father had. She only asked his name. He did not give it. He looked at her a moment, the straight back, the steady hands, the jaw that had refused to break, and said only that she should give the satchel to no one but a territorial judge, and let no clerk in Santa Fe touch it until a judge had seen the whole of it first. Then he mounted the black horse. She called after him as he rode up the wash. Her father would want to know who to thank, and without turning, the man in the black cape said the old man already had everything of his worth thanking. It was riding home beside him. Then, the canyon took him, one dark shape against the last of the light, and he was gone. They came down out of the canyon in the dark, the girl and the old man, and the satchel between them, and they did not push the horses. There was no one behind them anymore. By spring it was settled, and it was settled in a courtroom, not a canyon. The satchel went to a territorial judge in Santa Fe, in Don Aurelio's own living hand, and it held enough 3 forged signatures, the bought witnesses, the doubled surveys, the ledger of emptied houses that even a system slow to protect old Spanish water rights could not look away. 2 of Halloran's own men, run to ground by a deputy marshal, chose testifying over years in the territorial prison. As restitution, the court awarded the Sindez family 40 head of Halloran cattle still grazing their ground. And so, under the eye of a court officer and 2 local stockmen, with witnesses to swear to the new mark, Isadora ran them through the chute one at a time, and set the Sindez brand on each, beside the cancelled company mark, a vent brand. The ranchers called it, from the old Spanish venta, a sale mark. A second iron set on the same hide to cancel the first, and say a thing had changed hands. Except this time it said the opposite of what it usually said. It did not say the animal had been sold. It said it had come home. I think about that satchel more than I think about the guns. A whole valley of frightened people had signed their homes away to a leather case full of neat forged papers, and it took a girl with steady hands to carry one of those papers back into the light and turn it against the man who wrote it. They tried to steal the water with a signature. But a signature only owns what the frightened agree to hand over, and some people, it turns out, cannot be frightened. Somewhere north of that fence, a dark rider is still getting smaller against the red hills, and a well that never went dry still runs, on land that stayed in the hands that dug it.